everyone. Welcome to the discussion with Amber Robles-Gordon and Dr. Kelli Morgan. I'm Joshua Bennett. I am the gallery manager at Tinney Contemporary. We're super excited to have this work in our gallery, and the exhibition is quite extraordinary. If you haven't seen it in person, then I invite you to come in as soon as possible. It's only up for another week and a half. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then let them talk. So I'm just going to read these here. Amber Robles-Gordon lives and works in Washington, D.C., and is a key advocate and participant in the arts community there. She is a member of the Delusions of Grandeur Artist Collective and Black Artists D.C. Her artwork has been exhibited extensively nationally and internationally. Most recently, her work has been featured in exhibitions at Galleria de Arte Universidad del Sagrado Corazón, or the Sacred Heart University, in her birthplace of San Juan, Puerto Rico, by Tafeta Gallery in 154 Contemporary African Art Fair in London, England, American University, Katzen Art Center, by the Royal Academy of Arts Summer Exhibition in London, England, and many more. She has created numerous site-specific commissions, including public installations, with the DC Creates Public Arts program. Her work has been extensively covered in publications such as the Washington Post, Hyperallergic, Art Daily, Puerto Rico Black Art Blog, Be More Art, Culture Type, and more. She has been selected for various teaching residencies internationally, including the Centro Cultural Costarricense Norteamericano in Limon, Costa Rica, and Washington Projects for the Arts in DC Public Schools. Dr. Kelli Morgan is a professor of practice and the inaugural director of curatorial studies at Tufts University. She's a curator, educator, and social justice activist who specializes in American art and visual culture. Her scholarly commitment to the investigation of anti-Blackness within those fields has demonstrated how traditional art history and museum practice works specifically to uphold white supremacy. Besides her own curatorial experience, she mentors emerging curators and regularly trains staff at various museums to foster anti-racist approaches in collection building, exhibitions, community engagement, and fundraising. Over the past year, Dr. Morgan has become a leading and influential voice in bolstering anti-racist work in art museums. She has held curatorial positions at the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields, the Birmingham Museum of Art, and the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and teaching positions at Wayne State University, the University of Michigan, and the Tyler School of Art at Temple University. She earned her PhD in Afro-American Studies and a graduate certificate in Public History Museum Studies from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 2017. I'd like to welcome you both and thank you guys so much for being here. We're so thrilled to have you and to just sort of listen to you guys speak about this work. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua. Thanks for reading all of that. I need to, every time I hear, I don't know if you feel like that, Amber, I'll be like, I need a shorter one. It's too much. It's ridiculous.
Hey,
but,
accomplishments, right?
Yeah. I was like, but thank you so much for having us. I thank, Tinney Gallery. Amber, thanks for asking, me to do this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so happy. So, hey, boo, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here with you guys. Absolutely.
Good. So I guess we could and jumping in, I think you and I have just in our other conversations that we have such a good sort of natural flow.
Mm-hmm.
And something you said to me the other day about, spaces, right, to have the conversations that we can't always have, in our personal, the public professional spaces. So I'm hoping we can get into some of that, today, because I know how important that is to you. But to just kind of start off for the people who are with us today, talk about how you came to this body of work. I know you were working a lot with identity and a lot with Puerto Rico, and your connections, both personally and in terms of nationality, right? Back to that. Take us from there to how you got to sovereignty.
So, and that's a long journey. We're going to have to break that up just a little bit.
Okay.
but I'm sorry. So, how I like to talk about this is that this started with a journey to heal my 5-year-old self. And I was 5. My family's from St. Thomas, Puerto Rico, St. John, Antigua, Tortola. So I really consider myself a Caribbean woman, but that's my consideration from, the woman that I am now.
Right.
And I was raised in Arlington, Virginia. And at 5 years old, my first language was absolutely Spanish. And I was teased. I was teased at school because I didn't look, at least I'm assuming it's because I didn't look like what they do as a Latina, much less an Afro-Latina.
Gotcha.
And one day I came home and I basically told my mother, that I didn't want to speak Spanish anymore. And, who I am now realizes that I felt, the 5-year-old me felt I had to tuck away eventually what happened, what is part of my identity, a sliver of myself, in order to exist without being bullied.
Yeah.
And so that happened. And as I grew up and as an adult, I've known I wanted to be an artist since I was 8 years old. But around, I won't tell you how old I am, but around 30, I decided that I needed to figure out how to get back to PR. I needed to figure out how to be there, hopefully find some of my family, create there, and make experiences there. I can't think of a lack of a better word, but make experiences, moments. And so I reached out to someone who's been writing about my work for a couple of years. His name is Edwin Velasquez Caloso, and an artist, writer. And I said to him, I need to get to PR. I need to be able to write, live there, and create memories. And so he eventually recommended my work to a curator at Universidad de Ciudad, which is Sacred Heart University, and her name is Norma Vila. And so she got back to me and she said, we like your work. I need you to present something, present a proposal. And so I did. And that work ended up being called, that series, Place of Breath and Birth.
Okay.
And that was, it turned out to be basically 8 mixed media collages. They were 16 by 24. And what happened is, as I was researching partly my history and then being in PR for a period of time for first a 2-week introduction to the university, and then I came back, self-appointed residency. What I realized was that it wasn't just the ill treatment of Puerto Ricans that in relationship by the U.S. government. I realized that basically this is about blackness, and that I had to finish off, because at that point I think I'd only started maybe 2 or 3 of the smaller collages. But then I realized that I needed to go back and that the quilts needed to have a larger, more in-depth conversation about the ill treatment of the U.S. territories. And so we're talking about millions of people that, a good portion of people that consider themselves U.S. American citizens that reside on mainland U.S., okay? Because it's not just the mainland U.S. There's also the territories that are, strategically placed around the world. And that's how the quilts came into existence.
Okay. Yeah. And I was thinking about that, right? Because we don't often think about, you hear this all the time about American, the history or relationship with colonization, American imperialism. And, it kind of not so much ending, right? But it becoming this different thing, right? After slavery or after enslavement. And I'm do we not understand how Texas became a state? Do we not? And even more so, I think in regards to your work here, it's how Alaska and Hawaii became U.S. states, right? Yeah. And so that was something, in researching the work myself, that I was just this is a conversation that you never hear happening, right? Right. That's so so apt, to kind of this political moment, this socio-political moment that we're in. But that's so connected to the U.S. being a colonial power.
Yeah. Is there a question in there? Because I agree with you.
No, it's not. Like a
Okay, good.
conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, conversation.
Yeah.
I totally didn't even like. I put out some like some points, but I didn't want it to feel like an interview.
Okay.
You know, I wanted it to feel like us, like we were talking the other day. I wanted it to literally feel, you know, like we were having that conversation. Particularly since when you sent me the image of Simone Lee's piece in Venice, right? And like how that piece is also called sovereignty, right? You know,
When I saw the words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this whole idea of, like you said, the pathology, you know, that's just like laid on top of us, you know, whether it's political and, you know, issues of nationality to whether it's visual and like issues in the art market. You know, like you said, that anti-Blackness is something that we're always facing. And thanks, Joshua, for like showing people the actual quilts.
Yeah. So, you know, talking about overlaying, like, you know, or imposing like will and or, you know, their agenda on the territory. So one of the ways I tackled the quilts was basically by looking at, for example, originally I only thought that we were going to be presenting the works one-sided, the quilts one-sided, right? Mm-hmm. But then I decided to tackle that perspective because it was originally only supposed to be the political perspective by either dissecting the territory's seal or their flag. And so I mentioned this imposing of imagery, imposing of will, imposing of agenda. So what I realized is that the flags, they very seldomly actually responded to the territory's people themselves, right? So it was like an imprint, a stamp.
Yes.
And so that's why I was like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be my departure point. You know, I'm going to, you know, deconstruct.
Yes, unpack that all the way. Yeah.
Right. And so that's why in like, you know, USVI, you have the gold chains, and then you have like the head of the eagle here, and then you have the wing of the eagle here, you know, because I absolutely is challenging how do they interact with the actual living human beings that are residing and you know, everyday action, everyday movement, and day by day, week by week, month by year, how do these reflect these individuals? And that kind of led into, so for example, once I had like two of the political sides side by side, right? Sorry, quilts side by side, and I realized that in presenting only the political, those are the spiritual sides. But I realized that my spirit, my energy wouldn't allow me to only present criticism. To me, that didn't feel right. And in some sense, it felt one-sided. It felt like I would be doing somewhat of what the American society or political machine has done to the people.
It's doing. Yeah, no, I feel like that a lot in my work too. I'm always like, right? I'm always but it's like, yeah, you know, and then I think you're right to say that too, right? Like about how draining it is. So one, I want to just say for like everybody who's joining us, there's, you know, clearly there are two sides to each quilt. Yeah. So there's a political side where Amber, you know, deconstructs, like she just explained, like the flags, but then there's another spiritual side, which, you know, she'll talk about in a minute. But like what was deep for me that you did that, right, was like how political the spiritual is, particularly for Black women. You know, how it really is that deep spiritual dig, right, within ourselves, right? Not sometimes, and I mean, you know, not to offend nobody, but like, it's not always like Christianity or the Bible, right, or Islam and the Quran. A lot, it literally is here, right? When we have this moment of alignment where it's like, you know, no, this is me. Yeah. You know, and only I'm gonna get myself through this, and every fucking body, right, around me and behind me, like, is coming with me. So that was like, I was like, that's so dope. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Like,
I appreciate that. And let me tell you, that was a heavy thing because when I realized, so for example, Joshua, can you go to DC Political? The DC
Sure.
political quilt is called, the front side of it is called Political Welcome to the Digital, right? And so then if you go to the back side of it, the spiritual side is referencing the three larger indigenous Native American tribes in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, tri-state area. And so when I went from doing the political side and then deciding that I wanted to have a spiritual side. And so the first spiritual side that I had to tackle was the Native American indigenous side. And I think it was just, it was like consciousness basically, because then I started to research and look into symbology, and then I realized, oh, snap, wait.
Yeah.
It's not what I want.
Yes, this is some other shit. Yeah. Same thing happened to me in Indiana.
That consciousness, like going up your spine, it's like, oh,
yeah,
that's not what I want to do. So it was, and so there was a point where I had to step back and really take in, oh, am I really going to manage? Because then I had to look at the greater thing. It's like, you're also talking about millions of people and cultures and, and experiences. And I had to at the same time that I was creating this work, I was listening to Madalama Some's Of Water and the Spirit.
Oh, yes.
And so
okay.
I really had to sit back and just be with the universe and say, yo, are you really going to take on representing, all 5, and then including the District of Columbia of the U.S. territories? That's millions of people. And I don't want, and I do this with the I could possibly do. So I had to take on the fact that I had to consider what I was trying to say. Who am I really trying to impact, and was that hopefully more meaningful than the risk of stepping on somebody's toes. And even though I get, because I don't like when people step on my Black woman toes or my Puerto Rican, and I'm saying toes, but you know what I'm using it.
Of course.
But it was heavy. It was
No, it was like that. Yeah, I had a similar experience in Indy, right, where it was like I started to feel. I remember when I first got there, and I was like, something is off, and then you're just kind of like, well, maybe I'm tripping, right? So you don't think much about it. And the longer I stay, it's in exact same, and I'm not an artist, right? So I can't, I don't think I channel it in the same way, but it's like I could just be walking my dog, and I was like, it's in the ground, like something happened here. And that's like what kind of took me on this road to it myself, and then COVID happened. So the first like couple of months I was just in Indianapolis, nobody, people are in quarantine, and I'm just like, let me go out and see, because I'm always doing shit I ain't got no business doing. And it was that thing. It was like, what are you getting ready to do about this reality? Because clearly somebody need to say something about this shit, and I was just like, nope. Like, unlike you, I had a moment, like in like May, where I was like, I was like, Lord, I hear you, but nope. Nope. That's not what I signed up for.
Like, I'm not ready.
No, right? I was like, You know how like little kids, when they don't want you be trying to feed them something, they be like, I had that response, and I had to go through that. Like, I had to talk, actually, Black female friends, like, talk to 3 of my best friends to like talk me off the ledge, because I was like, no. No. So presenting that spiritual side of things, I was like, oh, this is so dope, because it's like, that's so true. It's like this other response that happens, that's been ancestral, for us Native American, Latinx, Black, even Asian. And I was like, that we kind of know, right? And like our, and how we may have, experienced it with our grandmothers or grandparents, great grandparents, parents, or just our communal spaces. but it's like finding ourselves in a political moment, now having to tap into it in ways that we weren't necessarily raised to do. Like no is a thing, right? But don't necessarily have to practice. And so I was like, I am so glad that you were visualizing that, for people, and that is also a collective process.
It absolutely was. And then, so for example, a way of framing what I'm absolutely trying to do in relation to the narrative of these quotes is that there is a conversation around people of the greater majority, right? And that information, whether it be, entertainment, media, education, and even our like specifically our news, the way it is presented to us, it is as though people of European or that are considered Caucasian are the majority. And look at your IG feed. The reason you're getting the response, the pro-white life, stuff that it's like overwhelming our feeds is because of what I'm talking about. Because the truth about it, and it hasn't been 80% of our world, the people that live on this planet, okay, are people of color, and they have been for an extended period of time. It's just that the way that imperialism and colonialism has structured itself and siloed us to believe that we have to fight for our connection in order to be connected to whiteness.
Yes.
Therefore, we see ourselves differently, and so I am absolutely trying to get a dialogue around these quilts and around the territories, starting with the territories, as this is about anti-Blackness.
Yes.
About people that are supporting, whiteness, white supremacy, and the European lens, and how it's been stamped and imposed on other people in the world.
Yeah.
And so once I realized that, then I said, oh, then I have to sit up a little taller and know that this isn't about Amber's agenda,
Yeah.
Because I beyond creation, because I love to create. That's what, that's where my energy comes from. Yeah. And if it absolutely, informs others, yes, if it absolutely gives them a level of energy and engagement and reciprocity in what they get from it, whether it be the color of the information or the materiality, then that just like piques my yes. As like the like little girl, yes, definitely. Yeah. But I had to put my big girl panties on and say, this isn't about me. It's about trying to heal the world. And I feel that sounds so idealistic, but hell, it's out there,
No, it's real. That's some real shit. Like I found, like I said, again, just finding myself in a step. I think, one of the reasons when we first met, I didn't find that coincidental at all, based on like what you were like, here's what I want to talk about. And I was like, oh, you just gave me so much life. Cause I feel like I have been on this island outside of like Latanya Autry, who is also in this chat. So shout out to you, Latanya. Thanks for joining us. But like, and people like Portia Moore, Andrea Montiel DeSchumann, right? Like it's a handful of us, but it ain't a whole lot of us. Yeah. And it's like, who are willing to take that risk to actually call it what it is. Because I have been saying, for a long time, like whiteness in and of itself is a psychosis, right? It is a normalized psychopathy, right? That has been normalized or been like, what do you call it? Like systematically, right? Normalized and structured over the last like 700 years. Yep. And what we're kind of witnessing in this time frame, or like in this sort of in our contemporary moment, is white people now and particularly white Americans, like coming to this slow or this gradual realization of how white supremacy and white cultural hegemony has fucked them up too. Yep. And I was like, you had, Barack Obama gets elected in, 2008, right? So white American conservatives have a complete nervous fucking breakdown. 8 years later, Donald Trump gets elected, and white liberals have the same fucking nervous breakdown for the exact opposite reason. Right? Right? And so I was like, so when are we going to deal, as the black revolutionaries used to say in the 70s, with this white thing? You know, and so it was, so when we first started talking, I was just like, yes, you are like saying all the stuff that I have been grappling with, you know, for the last like 7 years of my career, you know, because I had a very black life. You know, I'm a real surefire Detroiter. So like I didn't have my first white teacher until I was like in 3rd grade, right? And I realized that like how you were saying, having to go back to that 5-year-old self to say everything that has happened has prepared you for this.
Yeah.
Because you like you were saying, you have a lens, right, to see it in a way that nobody else does.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have a skill set, you know, to visualize it so that the rest of us can see it. And that's what's like thing.
So, you know, you that we met, and we have not met. We just vibe like shit.
True. That's true.
And I want you to talk really quickly
Zoom.
about your, I know, right? About your, I love the way that you talk about your practice. The way that you talk about the way that you approach. Do you remember that conversation? Like,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. The little, I call it excavating. You know, it's changed over the years, Amber. I used to call it surgery because I would always say that I'm like death by 1,000 cuts in this way. Like I got this really sharp scalpel and the cut is so clean that by the time the institution realized that I've actually made the incision, it's bleeding out, right? Right? Really horrible analogies, actually. Now I'm like, I feel more like an archaeologist.
yeah.
You know, where it's like I'm unearthing it. Because like here at Tufts and building the curriculum, it's like all of these seemingly, right, like disparate works. Because nobody's written about this stuff in the way that you're talking about it, right? In the way I'm talking, the way like Latanya's talking about it. So I have to create these through lines, right? Where you have to connect it for people.
Yeah.
So, you know, the recent thing, you know, that I've done is I put together this lecture where I talk about like the Catholic Church. I use Italy basically as the example. Like, you really want to know how this shit really functions or like how it was constructed. Let's look at 14th century Italy. And I talk about the papal bulls and how the Medici is this, you know, major, you know, just ridiculously wealthy family. And actually from 13th century, like through the 16th century, right, Italy, they literally fund, Spanish and Portuguese colonization, right? So the Spain and Portugal was getting money from this Italian family to make matters worse or better, right? In their case, there's also like 3 Medici, you know, generations of fucking popes.
Yeah.
Right? So
their is
yeah.
ridiculous. The
Right?
amount of control that they had during
Yes. So now I'm like, and what do we know about 14th century Italy that is like the fucking like flower child of art history? The Italian Renaissance was basically birthed from this family and their connection to fucking colonization. So I was like, and nobody thought that was like, you know, good to say to somebody at some point. Right, so in researching that, and you see how it pisses me off. I get so angry about it. But in researching that, it was this, like, the museum complex as a whole. So ethnographic museums, botanical gardens, zoos, natural history museums are the result of what Europeans, you know, felt like they could do to and with the world. And then the art museum emerges as this exclusive space where they represent how they see themselves in the world as conqueror. You know, and I was like, oh, museum studies is about to get all this business as soon as I can get this out. And it was excavating that, you know, again, like from a lens like you're using, just looking at Medici history. I'm not even talking about the Habsburgs, right? We're not even talking about King, like, because once the Enlightenment happens, it gets like 10 million times worse. So you get King Leopold in the Congo, right? Even a little bit before that, you get like the Napoleonic Wars and what Napoleon's doing to expand the Louvre. So Hitler's not an anomaly, people, right? Hitler is actually an ancestor. And what he decided to do was like, if y'all are going to cut me out of the world, I'm just going to colonize Europe and tell me I can't, right? So that was where, for me, it was like, it's all about whiteness. Like you said, it's completely and absolutely anti-blackness, across the board.
It is. And, through some of the research that I did, like, for example, one of the I read was How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immerwahr. And actually, after I finished the series itself, I contacted him and I was like, so would you be interested in having a conversation with me? And he actually did. But
good.
The reason I'm mentioning it is just how intricate and how critical some of the ways in which the U.S. government, or even some of the territories, like throughout the years, the territories have gone back because they do not have the same rights that mainland U.S. citizens have, because they're all U.S. citizens, right? Have the same access to, the presidential election and or some aspects of voting, right? And then some have like councils or things that they have like governing body, but that are only pertain to the island or the territory themselves, right? So they have this I don't know, disconnected level of citizenship.
Yeah.
And as I was researching, I would see time and time again how they would then reapproach Congress, right? Have their kind of breakdown why they should be considered, moving up from whether it be a commonwealth, or a territory, and then it's statehood. Yeah. And I told myself that I wouldn't use the verbiage, like when I was reading these this book and some other books along, I thought that I wouldn't use the verbiage that they use because it's just horrendous. The Congress would then tell them that basically why, but literally, it would be because you're not white, because you don't look like us. Except they would use horrible language, because you don't speak our language, and to me that was more of a incentive and more like a drive to push me to say, I need to do these quills, and I need to figure out how do I continue to draw out style about anti-blackness, in the way that these groups of people can figure out how can we relate to each other differently. How? Yeah. Because the foundation of how we see each other, whether it be colorism, whether it be like just flat out bias and racism, even amongst ourselves. I mean, if you think about how imperialists, and colonizers work, we literally see each other differently still based on our color and class, the color of our skin within our individual, ethnicities. How horrendous is that still exists, that we still allow it to and I was just having a conversation with another artist, and we were talking about how we can still see it in how we relate to our children, how we relate to our family members, our wives, our companions, and then we were able to then document how we saw it as a child, saw it as a teen, saw it in our homes, and saw it in who we choose to have relationship with.
No, completely. Like I have colorism in my family, particularly my father's side of the family, was ridiculous. I mean, that's how I wound up in Black Studies, because I had all of these questions. My grandfather looks white, and I would be like, Granddaddy's white, and then my cousins would be like, you can't say that, Granddaddy ain't white. I used to be like, he looked white to me. Well, okay. And then my own, like you said, just my own issues, because I was like my grandmother used to say, like, I married your grandfather so I could have pretty kids. And she was super dark skinned, and I always thought, my grandmother was gorgeous, but
Because she probably was.
yes,
Oh, you didn't know it yet.
it was crazy. And then in Black studies, African American studies, African diaspora studies, depending on the nomenclature, whatever departments you in, or whatever particular day,
Yeah.
started answering those questions for me. And then I was like, well, shit, if it's answering the questions that I have about my own crazy family members, like,
Yeah.
what other questions, right? Like, what other questions have I not even known to ask?
Yeah.
And I was down the rabbit hole, girl. Down the rabbit hole. And it just opened up the world to me in a whole other way. Like, where you had that moment where it's like, why don't I know these things?
Yeah.
And then I had professors that were like, well, let me tell you why you don't know.
Yeah.
And I never turned away from it.
Oh yeah, it gets so damn heavy.
It does.
It
does.
I'm heavy.
Yeah. I was like, I try to incorporate the spa dates, pretty regularly. Yeah, particularly now.
The spa dates.
That's real.
I know it is. I just didn't expect you to go there.
I be like, girl, I got to go. Like, I got a friend, my friend Kim, she gonna kick my butt. Because I owe her a phone call, probably 10 days ago. But I just it's like I haven't had the capacity. It's like I love her to death, but it's like I haven't been present, enough to talk like we typically do.
Yeah.
And I'll probably call her tonight or text her tonight and tell her that. But it was like just starting to see that, like how it just sucks the life out of you, because it's hard, heavy stuff, because it really has structured our reality, for the last, like I said, 500, 600 years, and then to also say, well, clearly we ain't getting ready to change that today. Right? Like this show, a curriculum, particular exhibition, write a book or an essay, like, yeah, that ain't getting ready to happen. But like knowing that that's what needs to happen, so knowing that we have to do as much as we can, right, to like crack the foundations, or at least crack the facade, right, of the structure, so that the generations after us can keep doing the work.
Yeah.
Can I jump in for a second and talk about the generations to come?
Sure.
Something that this work speaks about that you guys haven't really touched on yet is the idea of climate and environmental racism. Could you talk more about how the work speaks to that, Amber? And Dr. Kelly, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that as well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So one of the ways I absolutely wanted to address themes I want to address in the works was about environmental racism, and while I was researching, the way that the Doppler system works, the way that we depict either pain in our bodies and or the way that weather affects our environment, our world, is through the Doppler system, and it's through what looks like a color gradation. Starts in reds, comes out into the blue, the greens and blues. And I expanded that because I love color, but it's absolutely about to draw in a conversation about environmental racism and how, the fact that weather affects, the islands is of course an obvious thing, but it's intensified because of an extended misuse of our earth.
Yes.
And it's not pertaining to one single, island. This is about the collective misuse of our earth. And literally, the way that somebody put it to me last night, they were like, and the earth is fighting back. And that's
Sure.
why it's increasing amount of, hurricanes, cyclones, and earthquakes. And so what happens is that you have these land masses, these islands, which are territories that are more in very ideal places for this weather to happen, but also it's about the lack, because the environmental racism or lack of justice that comes in relationship to the protective measures, the money for protective measures, aftercare, the I can't think of the term that they use, but for the care after the hurricane, you know, affects millions. I mean, the last hurricane, Irma and Maria, they affected about 3 to 4 million people. And not to mention that there's some parts of PR even now that are still dealing with the effects of those hurricanes. And you know, in between that time, there was massive earthquakes that occurred on the island. And so one of the ways I did that was through that gradation, you know, and, you know, in relationship to the symbology, the way that because I'm staring at the work, so I'm seeing all my my symbols that I you know, and one of the ways that I do that, for example, on the political side, the messaging, the dialogue, I do that within a number of circles. So throughout my own practice and, you know, research, I address circles as it relates to humanity, relates to the depiction of time, the cycle of life, womanhood. And so if I have something to say, a lot of times, whether it be because I believe in casting prayers and saying prayers, casting spells, and I do them within a circle. And, you know, earth-based magic done a circle. And then on, you know, the spiritual side, it's a little bit different, especially in the lines and energies that come in and out. That's talking about ethereal energy. You know, when I say that I wanted to be able to, for an individual to walk up the quilt and be confronted with what I'm saying on the front side, but then quelled or at peace with the energy that I'm conveying on the backside, because I want you to feel the people, you know. And it was really important that I did it from a vantage point in symbology in relation to geometric shapes, line shapes, things that are universal.
Constant.
I need everybody to be able to act visually, whether it's that you interpret each line or each circle or shape, but there's a connective strand that flows through all of us, whether we like it or not. One of the things that visually is through the basics of line, shapes, and connectivity. So, you know, and then further, if you look, go to Guam, Josh, please.
Sure thing.
And I want you to zoom into the inside of Guam, the army print. I don't know if they're going to be able to see the army print. Can you see it?
Yeah, right there.
Yes. Okay. So on some of them, specifically Guam and Northern Mariana Islands, on those two political sides, I included the army print because of the impact in which the army and the armed forces has taken over land, taken over, you know, and once you take over land, you're messing with somebody's agriculture. You're messing with somebody's connection to how they feed, how they harness medicine, and energy through natural foods. You know, and so what that does is it's a cutoff to spiritual value. It's a cutoff to, like I said, medicinal.
The spiritual connection.
Yes, yes, and not to mention that a good portion of these people that lay their lives for us when it comes to being in the U.S. Armed Forces, and then they come back home and they are treated as though that they like they didn't go and risk their lives, and when it comes to getting the right health care, and not just health care but mental health care. So
it's amazing the kind of sorted hamster wheel it is. I'm glad Josh brought that up because that was something else that stood out to me too, was you putting the climate change issue, you know, in direct relationship, you know, to white patriarchal capitalism.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and I'm not a huge environmentalist. Like I don't follow, right, like I don't necessarily like follow climate change news, you know, in the same way that I do, right, like racial issues or political issues.
Yeah.
But one thing that I noticed was that, like, you know, we're talking about climate change and nobody was talking about, you know, how it is a direct result of white supremacy. You know, and particularly when we're talking about, you know, capitalist business venture, you know, and that raping of like the natural world.
Yep.
And so then it's like, okay, so then even the climate change, you know, what would you sector? I don't even know what you would call it. Like has this blind spot, you know, to the literal like racist aspect of it, you know, and that was something that again, like your quilts kind of pull all of that, you know, into like I said, what the reality really is.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't allow us, like we can't look at your work and stay in this space of like, you know, gender or again, climate change or, you know, patriarchy, right? Right. We have to look at the intersectionality, you know, to use that overused word now, right? But like we really do have to look at all of that, you know, and grapple with it. There's no easy approach, you know, to quote unquote fixing it. But we definitely have to like at least begin to acknowledge the fact that it is all happening simultaneously.
And speaking of that, you know, one of the things I also parallel this conversation about and land to the female form, to the female body, and imperialism and colonialism and the way that it functions is about control and parallel control of the female body and of general. The parallel conversation, there was a parallel abuse, there's a parallel harm that is being done to our earth and to our women.
Yeah.
For what they call power.
Yeah.
And we're not just even talking about just land, okay? What I mentioned earlier, you know, in relationship to why they chose specific lands, territories, claim as their own, whether it be through annexing, or through like at the ending of a battle, it was agreed upon. Some of them were
treaty.
Thank you.
Paris.
And so we're also talking about water. Not only do they want to own, you know, other people's land, other people's bodies, but they want to control water and they want to control air.
Yeah.
Why? Because they want a strategic advantage over who they deem they may, at some point, come to war, want to have war and strategic advantage of in warfare. Okay? To me, I don't see how we have these conversations and not parallel how the United States system manages, you know, control land, air, and women in the same way. Pillaging.
Girl, say it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like real quick, I see how we don't say it because it's one of those unsaid things. Because good Lord, for the people that you know, we don't want to ill or of the people that do say it and that do make those connections.
You know, and I think, you know, too, I'll say this and then we can open it up for questions for people, but like the fact that if saying it, right, identifying it, like people there, you would have to grapple with your own complicity in it. You know, like something about, you know, again, going back to my professors, and they would say, you know, we were all about, you know, we was in SNCC and we was in the South, and we was doing our thing, and we took our asses to Haiti. And we realized just how American, you know, we were. Right? Yeah. You know, and it was like, it was eye-opening for them, you know, as 20-somethings who thought they was in, you know, Mississippi doing something.
Right.
You know, and not that they weren't, right? But it was fascinating to hear from them in their 70s, you know, like, you know, late 70s, early 80s at that point, you know, when they're talking to us, like, yeah, you know, because that was their whole thing about us, right? Like, you know, y'all are so uncomfortable and ain't shit going on. Y'all ain't experienced nothing, you know, but it was fascinating when it was like, it completely changed their perspective.
Yeah.
just having to admit like their own complicity in the very thing that they were fighting. And I think that's the thing. It's like people don't want, not just white people, right? But it's like just people in general. We're comfortable as hell, in where we are, right? Like COVID just completely like blew the lid off of just how comfortable our asses are. Because it was like a mask. What you mean wear a mask? Like, no, it's hot, right? we're the most like prima donna citizens.
But what a contradiction! Because I agree with you, but on the same token, or the other side of the token, is that, and we're still fighting for rights to control our own bodies, or
Yeah.
fighting for rights to not be approached by cops when you one of the last videos I saw was a officer who had gone through training, a particular type of training, and he had his garb, the office garb on, and challenged by white officers. It's just, you know, it's esoteric, but basic things that we are still not afforded the right to do.
Yeah.
It's such a contradiction.
It is. Sometimes I feel like that Steve Harvey joke where he's like, it's an old joke. But he talks about like kids falling asleep in the car. Like that's why you put your kids in the car and go to sleep. Because he was like, they're so overstimulated, like as you're driving, and it's like, ooh, look at this, and ooh, look at that news, and then it gets to a point where it's like, oh, it's too much, I just gotta go to sleep. And it's like, that's how I felt over the last 2 years. Amber, I'm just like, it's too much, I gotta go to sleep. Like, it's the only way, to cut it off. But yeah, it is. It's so contradicting and it's so heavy. Yeah, it is. It is. Josh, would the questions come to your device? Because
are you seeing comments on the bottom here?
I can see comments.
I can scroll through them. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So some people, someone said most negatively impacted by climate devastation are Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, poor people. This same commenter said Nick Estes has a book, Our History in the Future. Our History is the Future, and discusses U.S. imperialism, colonialism, devastation, and of the lands and water. And, someone else said we need more of these uncomfortable aha experiences as a culture, as an American culture, I'm presuming. But yeah, if any of our viewers have any questions, please comment below, and we'll ask them. We'll read them out loud and answer them.
And thank you for the person that said, what a conversation. We tried. They don't talk about the mindset in most art history courses. That is real. They don't.
Well, and I can speak to that personally too. I mean, in terms of knowing about the U.S. territories, I mean, I've learned so much just through this exhibition, Amber. This stuff isn't taught, I think, because it's sort of dark, like it's certainly, I sort of view it as modern day colonialism, which is probably not a far stretch at all, but it certainly feels exploitative, and especially as it pertains to, like you guys were talking about, rampant, unfettered capitalism, sort of just destroying the planet. There's a very unbalanced effect that is happening to these islands, in the global South in general. And so, yeah, I think that's sort of the largest point, like maybe the most, like the broadest point that this work is making is just this behavior, though it's been happening over the course of, almost 1,000 years at this point, or who knows, even longer, like it's coming to a head. And like you said, the planet is fighting back. And something that has stuck with me, and I don't know, maybe someone can tell me or remind me, but someone said that it's easier to understand the end of the world more than it is the end of capitalism. And that is just so true for me. Like, I don't...
Yeah, that's kind of deep.
That's kind of deep. That's the first time I've heard that. Damn. Yeah, that is
It's
deep.
easier to depict the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism, which is grim, you know, like,
It is, but
It's something about like, oh, I'm sorry, Amber, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's something about the fact that like we've never known anything else,
But
right?
we have though. We have known it in silos, right? We have known it in
Right?
full cultures. The problem is that in imperialism and colonialism is that it was not valued in the same way as it was in our individual cultural environments.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
Absolutely the devil's work. And that's because I couldn't think of anything. I got my
Look,
own.
I was like,
I said
now
about
that conversation, I don't know if we should have on IG, but like, yeah, I could, girl, yeah, we could totally talk about that part. Like, because I have definitely had my moments where I've been like, yeah, this is not of God. You know, it's just not. You know, and I was like, and there's just no way there's just like, there's no other, like, I got to this point in the summer of 2020 or like early fall where I was like, there's no other way to make it make sense.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, because it's that bad. You know, and it's like when you look at other ancient civilizations, you look at slavery even, and other civilizations, you look at war, right? You know, in ancient civilization, and I get it, technology changed, blah, 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 but it was not what this is.
Yeah.
And this has been this, you know, like I said, you know, in this form since like the 18th century. You know, and I'm like, something is not right about that. There's some other things going on there. You know, that I don't think, like, if you say, and just kind of like the way I'm kind of talking around it now, right? People would think you crazy. You know, but I'm just like, you know, something about this just really isn't, you know, of God and of a higher power. Like, there's just no way.
At least in the way that they have presented capitalism to
Yes.
the world.
Yes.
I did see, so two things. I want to answer the question that talks about, let me see, I wanted to know about materials. Wondering if you could talk more about specific materials, quilts, and a particular significance of the material. Yes, and then I'm going to answer that, and I want to do like just the ending, like not a summary, but just my ending message in relationship to the to the quilts. So material, I actually decided to, I've always had the fabric. At one point, I wanted to be a designer. And then throughout the years, I've been intrigued by how, one, materiality, but very specifically in relationship to fabric, because of how our relationship with it. It is, I consider it one, if not the second skin. We don't leave home without clothing. In fact, rarely, and some people don't like see themselves nude, you know, beyond going in for a shower to some extent. We have been so conditioned to clothe, whether it be to hide, to embellish, to expose. Clothing is part of our, right? And so I see that this is like an extension of that. There's also very specifically cultural heritage around quilts from, yeah. So my family that is from the Caribbean, but also as a person who grew up in the States, so in Arlington, Virginia, I was exposed to a number of various cultural quilts, you know, as in these Ben quilters, Barbara Cole, and even through some of the cultural quilts that my mother exposed me to at an early age, you know, Ecuadorian or Salvadorian, the message, they're like steam quilts that they do. They're hand sewn and they show like landscape and scenes of like people going to and doing daily chores and things like that. So have them in my bathroom and in my living room. So they have imprinted, you know, even what's her name, Faith Ringwald, just a number of different influences that made me drawn to quilts. Additionally, when I first created this work for the American University Solo Exhibition, I thought I was going to be having a conversation with Robert Rauschenberg's. I wanted to respond to his series, Bed series. But what happened is that basically my social conscious, thread in my spine won over. Couldn't just do total abstraction, and such is life. But in relationship to the additional material, there is I build abstraction in layers. So you have the outer painted on each side, black or white. You have the inner circles, and I described on how the circles are a relationship between spirituality and message and narrative. Then you have the painted combination on the political side. You have a combination of paints, a combination of oil pastels, oil paint sticks, and or fabric. And I didn't get to talk about some of the foundational, because the foundational thing that comes from the bottom up through the center and down and up is based on the Ficus elastica, which is the rubber tree. It's one of the first that I encountered while on Sagrado de Corazon Sacred Heart University's campus in Puerto Rico. It's this beautiful tree that has just roots that extend out and down into the ground, and then they come up. Sometimes you can't the roots. Sometimes you can't even see the base of the tree. The roots cover it. It comes up, and then the roots hang down, and then the foliage of the tree go up. So I was always, that tree fascinated me. And so what I realized was that I began sketching. I promised myself during my residency there that I was going to sketch every day. And so on day 3 or 4, I realized that I was abstracting this ficus tree. And so the ficus tree, we don't have any of the smaller work to show you, but there's an iteration of ficus tree in every quilt, front and back. Can you go to one of the back of one of the spiritual sides? Excuse me. So this one is actually one of the ones where I don't technically see as much, because I gave it more, and it's not that I gave it. I literally the energy that I was working with when I created gave that very interesting central form that to me looks like a head. But anyway, so it is a conversation around the influence of that ficus tree. And so then on the spiritual side, I focused more online on drawing, on creating what I would consider a connection to ethereal energy. And so that's why you see all the hand connection and mark making. Did I get everything? I think that's everything when it comes to materiality. There's also the gradations on some of them. I absolutely. Can you go to the USBI spiritual side, please, Josh?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, and can you zoom into some of like where the spider webbing and where the mixed media? Yeah, so in these, there's glass, there's leather, there's other materials, and even beadwork. No, I did not do the beadwork. Is adhered, already done and adhered. But yeah, so that's some of the other mediums, materials that I utilize for to add into the narrative. But so what I wanted to say, if I can help or ask for something that people will walk away with in relationship to work is, a conversation about how we are perceiving each other. When it comes to people of color, we have more connective tissue than we have other things. There are more threads in how we relate to ourselves, our energy, our family, our land, and to each other, and we have to start acting as such, claiming it.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful note to end on, to be honest. I think that's the quintessential truth.
Amen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this. I love you so much.
Thank you, Kelli. I love you back.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your conversation. What a wonderful conversation to have, and one that's pertinent, timely, and apt for our world now. I mean, this work certainly speaks to a lot of the issues that we've been dealing with for a very long time, but it also feels very much a zeitgeist of today. And I think, as a gallery, to show work that is that touches on these important issues, like it makes it worth having a gallery to be a venue for this message. And we're just so pleased to have worked with Amber in this capacity, and we are eager to see how this work travels along in the future. Again, Dr. Kelli Morgan, thank you so much for your time and for your insight. We are going to keep close follow of what you are doing in the future, and if you're in Nashville, please come stop by. Yeah. Maybe we can even find an opportunity for you to be here somehow.
That'd be nice.
I would love that. Yeah.
And thank you for give us your time on the,
I know. Thanks, Josh.
Well, I'm glad we figured it all out. And yes, so just a reminder to all the viewers who are still watching, the show is up through July 9th. And next Saturday, July 2nd, we're going to have an opening reception at the gallery. So please stop by. Amber will be in attendance. And so if you would like to meet her in person, please stop by. We're on Representative John Lewis Way in downtown Nashville. Again, thank you guys so much. Have a great afternoon, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
All right. Bye.